It was a quiet afternoon in Willow Creek Park, a serene suburban oasis located in a bustling Midwestern city. The late sunlight filtered through the towering oak trees, casting gentle shadows over the picnic tables and walking trails. Among the few visitors enjoying the peaceful atmosphere was David Carter, a black man in his early 40s. Dressed casually in a crisp white shirt and khaki pants, he sat at a wooden picnic table with his laptop open, engrossed in his work. A former military intelligence officer turned FBI agent, David had chosen the park as his temporary workspace while conducting an undercover investigation in the area. The park's quiet offered a perfect setting for him to think and focus. Unbeknownst to him, Officer Timothy Harper, a veteran of the local police department, was making his routine rounds nearby. Harper had served for over 25 years and prided himself on his ability to read people. As he scanned the park, his attention zeroed in on David. Something about the scene, a black man sitting alone, appearing calm and focused, triggered Harper's internal alarms. In his mind, David didn't fit the usual profile of the neighborhood's residents. Harper's thoughts immediately drifted to a string of vague reports about petty crimes in the area. Convinced he might have stumbled upon a potential suspect, Harper decided to act. His approach was calculated but tainted with preconceived biases. Harper adjusted his utility belt, took a firm grip on his notepad, and started walking toward David. Meanwhile, David, accustomed to keeping a calm exterior in tense situations, remained unaware that this routine day at the park was about to take a troubling turn, one that would expose deep flaws in the system Harper served. Officer Timothy Harper walked with purpose, his boots crunching on the gravel path of Willow Creek Park. His years of experience and instincts told him something was off about David Carter, the lone black man sitting calmly at a picnic table. To Harper, the serene setting and David's composed demeanor didn't align. Prejudices clouded his judgment, amplifying his suspicion that David might be connected to recent petty crimes in the area. Harper approached with an air of authority, his presence disrupting the tranquility of the park. David looked up as Harper neared, sensing the officer's gaze before the first words were spoken. Calm but wary, he closed his laptop and sat back, making no sudden movements. His years as an FBI agent had prepared him for moments like this, where split-second decisions could determine the outcome of tense situations. "Afternoon, sir," Harper said, his voice firm, though it carried an edge of presumption. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" David, keeping his tone neutral, replied, "Just working. It's a public park, after all." Harper's eyes scanned the table, the laptop, and David's relaxed posture. His suspicion didn't waver. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," Harper continued. "You got any ID on you?" David's expression tightened slightly, but he kept his composure. He understood his rights, but also the potential dangers of refusing. "Am I being accused of something, officer?" he asked, his voice steady. Harper bristled at the question, interpreting David's calmness as defiance. "Look," Harper said, his tone hardening, "I'm just trying to do my job. Let's make this simple. Now?" Reluctantly, David reached for his wallet, moving slowly to avoid any misinterpretation of his actions. He handed over his driver's license, which Harper snatched with unnecessary force. Glancing at the name and address, Harper's suspicion remained unshaken. "Stand up," Harper barked, stepping back to give himself space. David hesitated for a moment, frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. He rose slowly, hands visible and non-threatening, aware that any misstep could escalate the situation further. "Turn around," Harper ordered, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. David's jaw tightened, but he complied, knowing that resistance would only complicate matters. Nearby park, goers stopped to watch, their murmurs adding to the tension. Harper cuffed David's wrists, the cold metal biting into his skin, and began leading him toward the patrol car parked at the park's edge. Throughout the walk, David stayed silent, his mind racing. He wasn't worried about his safety. He knew the truth of who he was would soon come out, but he felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about him. It was about the countless others who had endured similar treatment, judged solely by the color of their skin. As the patrol car door slammed shut behind him, David's face remained calm, though his frustration burned beneath the surface. Harper's grip on control felt secure, but the officer couldn't shake the feeling that something about this situation wasn't right. He didn't yet know that the man he had just arrested was an FBI agent, and that his own actions would soon bring consequences he wasn't prepared to face. The patrol car hummed steadily as Officer Timothy Harper drove toward the police station, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. In the back seat, David Carter sat silently, his face unreadable. Though his wrists were bound by cold, biting handcuffs, his calm demeanor betrayed no sense of fear. His years as an FBI agent had taught him patience, even in unjust situations like this one. Still, his mind raced with thoughts of how this unnecessary encounter would unfold and how it represented a larger problem within the system Harper served. As the car pulled into the station lot, Harper parked with a quick, jerky motion and stepped out. He opened the door for David, gripping his arm firmly as he guided him toward the precinct. Other officers milling about glanced at the pair, some curious, others indifferent. David caught their looks, but said nothing, maintaining his calm exterior. At the processing desk, Harper handed over David's ID to Officer Jenkins, a younger officer who was known for being sharp and observant. Jenkins glanced at the ID, his brows furrowing slightly. Something about the name and face seemed familiar, but he masked his recognition, typing quickly into the computer. "You need to take him to Lieutenant Amanda Lopez," Jenkins said after a moment, handing the ID back to Harper. His tone was clipped, and Harper hesitated briefly, wondering if Jenkins knew something he didn't. With a gruff nod, Harper led David down the hallway to Lopez's office. Lieutenant Lopez, a seasoned and no-nonsense leader, looked up as Harper knocked on her open door. Her sharp eyes immediately fell on David, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. She masked it quickly, her professional demeanor taking over. "What's this about, Officer Harper?" Lopez asked, leaning back in her chair. "I caught him acting suspiciously in the park," Harper replied, his tone firm. "He was evasive when I asked for his ID, so I brought him in for questioning." Lopez's gaze shifted to David, who met her eyes with calm confidence. "Is that so?" she said, her voice measured. "Mr. Carter, do you have anything to say for yourself?" David allowed himself a small smile before replying. "I'm David Carter, Special Agent FBI." His voice was steady, carrying an undertone of authority. The words hung in the air, heavy with impact. Harper froze, the color draining from his face as he processed what he had just heard. Lopez's expression shifted ever so slightly, revealing the validation of what she had already suspected. "Your FBI?" Harper stammered, his voice faltering. David nodded, his calm gaze fixed on Harper. "That's right. I've been working on an investigation in the area, and now I'm sitting in handcuffs because of your assumptions." Lopez rose from her chair, her tone firm but controlled. "Officer Harper, step outside. I need to speak with Mr. Carter alone." Harper hesitated, his pride and confusion colliding. "Now," Lopez said sharply, leaving no room for argument. Harper left the room, his mind spinning with the realization of his mistake. When the door closed, Lopez turned to David, her expression softening. "Agent Carter, I apologize for this misunderstanding. Rest assured, this will be handled." David leaned forward slightly, his calm giving way to frustration. "Lieutenant, this isn't just about me. It's about why this happened." Lopez nodded solemnly. "And we'll get to the bottom of it. You have my word." The air inside the precinct was tense as the investigation into Officer Timothy Harper's actions began. Word of the incident had spread quickly among the officers, and the revelation that the man Harper had arrested was PD agent David Carter only intensified the scrutiny. Seated in an internal review room, Harper looked visibly unsettled, his normally confident demeanor replaced by nervousness. Across the table, Lieutenant Amanda Lopez sat with a panel of senior officers, ready to dissect the events that had transpired. At the far end of the room sat David, composed as always, his presence a stark reminder of the gravity of Harper's actions. "Officer Harper," Lopez began, her tone formal, "you are here today to account for the decisions you made during your arrest of Agent Carter. This review will determine the appropriateness of your conduct and the potential consequences." Harper nodded stiffly, unable to meet her gaze. Lopez continued, flipping through the report in front of her. "Based on witness statements and body camera footage, it appears you detained Agent Carter without sufficient cause. Let's begin with your reasoning. Why did you approach him in the park?" Harper hesitated before responding. "He matched the description of a suspect we were looking for, a black male, mid-40s. He seemed out of place and suspicious." "And what exactly was suspicious about his behavior?" Lopez pressed. Harper faltered, searching for a defense. "He was sitting alone, working on a laptop. When I asked for his ID, he seemed hesitant." David, sitting silently until now, interjected, his voice calm but firm. "Hesitant to comply with an unjustified demand, Officer Harper. There's a difference." Harper glanced at David, his face reddening but unable to form a retort. Lopez looked to the body cam footage displayed on the screen. The video showed Harper's aggressive demeanor, his insistence on "I'd" without cause, and his immediate escalation to handcuffing David despite no signs of resistance. "Officer Harper," Lopez said, her voice sharp, "your actions here show clear bias. You assumed guilt based on nothing more than a vague description and, frankly, racial profiling." Harper opened his mouth to defend himself, but Lopez continued. "You've served this department for over 25 years, and yet you allowed prejudice to guide your decisions. This isn't just about your actions that day. It's about the systemic impact of such behavior on the community we are sworn to serve." David leaned forward, addressing the room. "Incidents like this don't just harm individuals. They erode trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It's a symptom of a larger issue that requires real change." Lopez nodded in agreement, turning back to Harper. "Effective immediately, you are placed on temporary leave, pending additional sensitivity training and further investigation. Depending on the findings, you could face termination." Harper slumped in his chair, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. For the first time, he seemed to understand the severity of his actions. As the meeting adjourned, Lopez turned to David. "Agent Carter, thank you for your patience and for bringing attention to this issue. We're committed to addressing the root causes and ensuring this doesn't happen again." David stood, his composure intact. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I hope this serves as a turning point, not just for this precinct but for law enforcement as a whole." Lopez nodded solemnly. "It will. That's a promise." The room emptied, leaving behind the sense that real change, however slow, had finally begun. A crisp, morning breeze swept through Willow Creek Park, carrying the distant sounds of a community slowly healing. Inside the police precinct, the atmosphere was subdued, yet charged with determination. Change, though gradual, was finally underway. Workshops on racial bias and de-escalation techniques were now part of every officer's training, and Lieutenant Amanda Lopez had initiated community outreach programs aimed at rebuilding trust. The once casual chatter in the precinct halls was replaced by quieter, more reflective conversations, as officers reckoned with the lessons of recent events. David Carter returned to the precinct for one final meeting with Lopez. As he entered her office, he noticed subtle signs of progress, a new bulletin board promoting diversity training, and a shift in the demeanor of officers, who now greeted him with respectful nods. Sitting across from Lopez, David listened as she updated him on the steps taken since his arrest. "The reforms are moving forward," Lopez explained, "but there's still a long road ahead." David nodded thoughtfully. "Systemic change isn't easy, Lieutenant, but what I've seen here gives me hope. It's about more than policies. It's about transforming mindsets." Their conversation was interrupted briefly as Officer Timothy Harper passed by the open door. Dressed in plain clothes, carrying a box of personal items, Harper avoided eye contact but paused briefly at the threshold. "Mr. Carter," he said hesitantly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." David met Harper's gaze, his tone steady. "Acknowledging the problem is the first step, officer. What matters now is what you choose to do moving forward." As Harper departed, Lopez turned back to David. "Your presence here has been invaluable," she said. David smiled faintly. "This is only the beginning. Real change takes time, but I'm here to ensure it happens." With that, David left, determined to turn this moment into a catalyst for lasting justice. The story of racist police officer arrests black man. Turns out his FBI serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of prejudice and the importance of accountability in positions of authority. It highlights how unconscious biases can escalate into unjust actions, damaging trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. In our daily lives, this story encourages us to confront our own biases and question assumptions. Whether in professional settings or personal interactions, we must recognize that appearances and preconceived notions can cloud judgment. Practicing empathy, listening actively, and engaging in meaningful conversations about race, privilege, and equality are essential steps toward creating a more inclusive society. For institutions, the story underscores the need for systemic change. Training on cultural competency, implicit bias, and de-escalation should be prioritized. Accountability mechanisms, such as body cameras and transparent review processes, can help ensure justice and fairness. The key takeaway is clear. Respect and fairness should guide all actions, regardless of a person's background. By holding ourselves and our systems accountable, we can help foster trust and mutual respect. This isn't just a call to law enforcement, but to every individual, to treat others with dignity and work toward equity in all aspects of life. Today's story isn't just about the harm caused by prejudice, but also highlights the importance of confronting wrongdoing to drive meaningful change. If you were in David Carter's position, what would you choose? Would you fight to the end to defend the truth and push for systemic change? 1. Or stay silent and let it pass? 2. Leave a comment with number 1 or 2 below. I'm eager to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel.